Hey there. You know how everyone's talking about global conflicts right now? Well, we're going to dive into a different kind of story today, one that might actually shape the entire century. We're taking a look at China's economy, specifically what's happening as we head towards 2025. Get this, some analysts are saying China's economic engine is sputtering.
That's right. And while the world is focused elsewhere, some pretty concerning signals are coming out of China. You might have heard about the economic slowdown there, but it's easy to think, well, that's China, not my problem. But here's the thing. What happens in China has ripple effects everywhere.
Okay, so let's unpack this.
hmm
One of the most striking signs of this slowdown is the sheer number of empty housing units in China. We're talking about a staggering 90 million empty homes. That's almost 3 times the entire population of Canada.
It really highlights the potential flaws in China's recent economic strategies. For decades, their growth was fueled by massive investments in real estate infrastructure projects and, of course, exports. And it worked for a while, but it created what economists are calling a success trap.
A trap. It doesn't sound good. What exactly does that mean?
Imagine this. You put all your savings into real estate, and suddenly prices drop by 30%. That's the reality many Chinese citizens are facing right now. Local governments are heavily invested in land sales to developers, and now they're drowning in debt.
So it's like the foundation their growth was built on is starting to crumble.
In a way, yes. And to make matters worse, their heavy reliance on exports is causing friction with their global trading partners.
Right, because they need those global connections to access raw materials and reach new markets. It's a catch-22. They need to sell to the world, but they also rely on the world.
Precisely. And this is where the situation gets even more complex because we have to factor in the political landscape in China, specifically the role of the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP.
Okay, so let's talk about this political tightrope. It's no secret that the CCP has a tight grip on power in China. How does this impact the economic situation we're discussing?
Well, think about it this way. When people struggle financially, when they feel like their economic security is slipping, maintaining control becomes a whole lot harder. Xi Jinping and the CCP are very aware of this. They know they need to make changes, but any real reform could be risky for them. It could jeopardize their hold on power.
So they're stuck between a rock and a hard place. They need to fix the economy, but doing so might make them less powerful.
Exactly. It's an incredibly delicate balancing act. And it's created this situation where China seems to be grappling with two divergent paths forward.
Two-path. Okay. I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
On one hand, there are signs of increasing control and repression. For example, there have been reports of churches being forced to replace images of Jesus with portraits of Xi Jinping. It's a pretty chilling indication of the lengths they might go to in order to maintain control.
Wow, that's definitely unsettling. So that's one path, more control, more repression.
Right.
What's the other option?
The other path involves finding new avenues for growth and innovation. And interestingly, technology plays a key role in both scenarios. On one hand, China is investing heavily in surveillance technology, which could be used to further tighten their control.
So technology as a tool for repression, basically.
Unfortunately, yes. But on the other hand, they're also pouring resources into becoming a global leader in green technology and, crucially, semiconductor production.
And that's something that should have everyone's attention.
Absolutely. Imagine a future where China controls the world's supply of computer chips. Think about the implications for technology, global power dynamics, everything. It's huge.
Okay, so two potential paths. One toward more control, the other towards technological dominance. A lot to unpack there. It feels like 2025 is shaping up to be a pivotal year for all of this.
It does, doesn't it? And that's why you should care. What happens in China over the next few years has the potential to impact everyone. We're talking about things like trade wars, technological dominance, even global power shifts. This is a story that's only just beginning to unfold.
So with 2025 looming as this potential turning point,
Mhm.
what are some specific things we should be watching for? If you had to give us, say, 3 big things to keep an eye on, what would they be?
Okay, great question. First and foremost, watch how China handles its growing debt crisis. Remember all that investment in real estate and infrastructure? Well, a lot of that was fueled by borrowing, and now local governments are struggling to repay those debts.
So what are their options? What can they actually do about it?
That's the billion-dollar question. Will they try to keep propping up failing industries with even more loans? Or will they bite the bullet and implement painful but necessary reforms? The path they choose will have major consequences.
Makes sense. So debt crisis is number one.
Yeah.
What's the second thing we should be watching?
Keep a close eye on China's relationship with the West, particularly the United States. Remember how we talked about China's push for technological dominance? Well, that's creating some serious tension, especially when it comes to things like artificial intelligence, and as we mentioned, there's all-important semiconductors.
Yeah, we've already seen how things like trade wars and tariffs can play out. It's not just China and the U.S. that feel the impact either. It seems like those kinds of economic disputes end up impacting global supply chains and pretty much everyone.
Exactly. And you have to remember, these economic tensions often spill over into the geopolitical realm. It's all connected.
It's like this high-stakes game of chess is playing out on a global scale.
Hmm.
Each side is making these calculated moves, trying to anticipate what the other will do.
That's a great analogy. And speaking of chess, the third thing you'll want to watch is how China manages its own internal pressures. They're facing some big challenges like a growing wealth gap between the rich and poor, serious environmental issues, and a population that's becoming more vocal about their concerns.
It's a lot for any government to handle, especially with all these economic challenges looming. So we've got this complex web of economic uncertainty, political maneuvering, and potential global fallout. It's a lot to wrap your head around. If you were advising a global company right now, one that does business internationally, what would you tell them to prepare for in the coming years, knowing what we've discussed about China?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The old playbook for dealing with China is changing rapidly. Companies need to be adaptable. They can't just assume things will go back to the way they were. Diversifying their supply chains, anticipating disruptions, those are key.
Don't put all your eggs in one basket, so to speak.
Exactly. And maybe even more importantly, stay informed. Understand the dynamics at play here, both the risks and the opportunities. The only way to navigate this is to be paying attention.
Because the one thing that's certain is change, especially with a global powerhouse like China. We've covered a lot of ground today: ghost cities, debt traps, political tightropes, technological races, and it's clear that China's decisions in the coming years will have profound implications for all of us.
Absolutely. And as we've discussed, staying informed, being adaptable, and really trying to understand the human side of these global shifts, those are going to be key to navigating the uncertainties that lie ahead.
This has been an incredibly insightful deep dive. But before we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with something to ponder. We've talked a lot about the economic and political factors at play in China, but what about the human element? Think about the hopes, dreams, and anxieties of the everyday people living through this period of profound change. How will their lives be impacted by the choices their leaders make in the coming years? It's a question worth considering as we navigate this new era of global uncertainty.
Absolutely. And remember, understanding those human stories, the individual experiences behind the economic data and political headlines, is crucial to truly grasping the complexity of the situation.
Think about it. If you were living in China right now, how would you feel? The choices their leaders make in the coming years about the economy, about technology, about control those choices, will have a very real impact on the lives of over 1 billion people. And when you think about it like that, it really drives home the magnitude of what's happening over there.
It's easy to get caught up in the geopolitical chess match, to see China as just another player on the world stage. But at the end of the day, this is about people's lives. It's about families trying to make ends meet, entrepreneurs hoping to build something new, young people navigating a future that feels increasingly uncertain.
It's a good reminder that even as we analyze these global trends, even as we talk about things like economic crossroads and technological dominance, there's a deeply human story unfolding in China. And understanding those stories, those individual experiences, that's key to truly grasping what's at stake here.
I couldn't agree more.
Well, that feels like a good place to wrap up our deep dive into China's economic landscape and what it means for the world, particularly as we approach 2025. We've covered a lot of ground today, from those ghost cities and that debt crisis to the political tightrope China's leaders are walking. And of course, we couldn't ignore the technological race that's already well underway.
It's complex, it's rapidly evolving, and it has the potential to reshape the world as we know it.
And that's why it's so important to stay informed, to keep asking questions, and to never lose sight of the human impact of these global shifts. That's all we have time for today, but keep those questions coming. We'll be back soon with another deep dive into the trends shaping our world. Until then, keep learning, keep exploring, and we'll see you next time.